Today we're going to dive in at GamecockCentral.com here on our YouTube page on the evolution of Javon Kinlaw, Gamecock defensive tackle who went on to be a first-round pick in April of the San Francisco 49ers. And we're going to check out some of his tape from high school and junior college and just sort of look back on his recruiting process and his growth. Be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, and drop a comment for us if you want more Gamecock football content. Here's what Kinlaw looked like around the first time we met him. This photo is actually from Friendship Academy in DC. He actually transferred to Goose Creek early in his high school career, and here's what he eventually turned into at South Carolina. So as we roll some of the tape here from Kinlaw's I think senior year at Goose Creek, we'll take a look at what he did at the high school level. Really interesting to look back on his high school career and just what he was able to accomplish in progressing to, a junior college standout who garnered a lot of scholarship offers, and then eventually to the college level at South Carolina, where he underwent a big transformation and turned into one of the best players in the country as a senior in 2019. So Kinlaw, the first time I met him was at a combine in York, and I think he was 15 or 16 years old. He was 6'5", he was 285 pounds, and was about as raw as it gets. He's someone that, this was a combine, so there were no drills. In terms of football, it was all testing stuff. He didn't really know how to bench. He couldn't really run a 40. He was just extremely raw, but as you talk to people around the Goose Creek program, they thought he had a really significant upside. And he was able to show some of that development during his high school career. Now here's the interesting thing. A lot of people in the recruiting industry thought that Kinlaw was going to turn into an offensive tackle prospect. I remember his high school coach, Chuck Reedy, who has college coaching experience as a head coach and a position coach. He was his high school head coach at the time at Goose Creek. He thought that Javon's biggest upside was at offensive tackle. I thought the same, and I thought that I still think he could have been an elite offensive tackle, but what he turned into was an elite defensive tackle. And I think even in high school, Javon was able to show some of the, just some of the flashes of his potential. You got to remember, Javon came from a really unique background. His story's been covered, in depth in terms of just being homeless at times and coming from, a difficult situation. And I think he deserves a ton of credit for what he was able to do in terms of transforming his body, in terms of really maturing and just making the best out of his situation. But you see here, Javon, to his credit, always stuck with the idea that he was going to go on and become a dominant defensive lineman. He played a lot of end here for Goose Creek. You see his movement skills out in space. You already see he's got the frame or he could turn into a defensive tackle. He's got long arms, long-limbed, just got a lot of explosive potential. Now here's what he turned into in junior college. Now Will Muschamp quickly identified, he took the job in December 2015 at South Carolina and identified Kinlaw as a guy that he really wanted to place. He didn't academically have the grades to be able to, sign and enroll somewhere immediately. So Muschamp identified Kinlaw and placed him on an accelerated path to go to Jones County Junior College in Mississippi, and that way he could get out earlier. He was originally in the 2016 recruiting class, and he had offers from South Carolina, Clemson. His dream school in high school, interestingly, was actually Florida. I remember reading some stories from Rivals.com's network back in the day saying that his dream school was Florida, where, of course, at the time, Will Muschamp coach, former Gamecock assistant Brad Lawing, was recruiting Kinlaw at the time. So Muschamp, when he got to South Carolina, had plenty of familiarity, and the two parties were familiar with each other. So Muschamp placed him at Jones County. Kinlaw left high school early to be able to go out there, and he was able to quickly get into the very next class, the 2017 class. And when he got there, he really blew up. Alabama offered him. Southern Cal offered him. So Kinlaw had been committed to the Gamecocks, and he ended up decommitting for a brief time. I think there's just a lot going on in the recruiting process. Obviously, when some of the nation's most prestigious programs are coming after you, it gave him a lot to think about. Muschamp really stuck with it. They built an excellent relationship, a lot of trust, and they were able to eventually get him back in the fold, get him committed, get him signed, and then Kinlaw was able to enroll at South Carolina. So there was a lot of excitement around Kinlaw because they felt like he would have an opportunity to eventually be a really good player at South Carolina. The first thing for him upon enrolling was just, hey, got to reshape the body a little bit. He was 330, 340 when he got to South Carolina. And so Kinlaw underwent one of the more dramatic transformations that you'll see in terms of just really reducing his body fat, packing on muscle. He was really one of the more physically impressive, physically imposing guys in the entire country last year. And on top of that, he just really driven. He was a guy that could command, double teams and could split them one-on-one. He beat some of the country's top interior offensive linemen last year. You look at the Gamecocks schedule in 2020, they played Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, some of the country's best teams with some of the country's best players. And whether it was Clemson's John Simpson, who was a NFL draft pick, a low country product himself, an NFL draft pick to the Oakland Raiders, he won a lot of those matchups. Georgia's touted offensive line, he had a huge game there. Alabama's offensive line, he made a lot of plays in that game. So Kinlaw, really showed what he could do against some of those teams, had a big game against Florida, and was eventually able to develop into a guy who became the 14th overall pick in the NFL draft by the San Francisco 49ers. So just an amazing story with Kinlaw going from a guy who was, 6'5" and 280 as a 16-year-old and a guy who thought, hey, maybe this guy's an offensive tackle, not really sure if he'll develop into a big-time defensive lineman. He stuck with it. He deserves a lot of credit for, his maturity both, on and off the field, and as well as just reshaping his body, taking coaching, and really developing into an excellent player. So let's take a look here, courtesy of Gamecock football, at when Javon Kinlaw got the call.
Hello? It is? I'm pretty good. Most definitely. You know it. Yes, sir. Let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Give me a break. San Francisco 49ers
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.